Welcome to Carl DeGregorio's Desk Session 88, where we don't stop and start. We so far have the option to edit. I haven't ruled that out. But we don't stop and start. But we do start all over again and delete. So this would be take 2, but like I said, the idea is to plow through. And now that we're at 88, 88 is a great number for a few reasons. And one of them is obviously that's a very popular number in the wide receiver category. A lot of famous 88s. Drew Pearson from the Cowboys. I think all the great Cowboy receivers, if they are receiver number 1 on the depth chart, get to wear 88. It's similar to 10 being reserved for like the best striker, like Pele was 10, Messi is 10, all the great scoring champions. That number is sort of not retired, but reserved for the best of the best. And I think 88 in Cowboy lore is that. I think on other teams have not sort of adopted that. I'd have to check that. But receivers and tight ends get to wear 80s, and that's cool. And 88 is also just anecdotally, there's a story. Is it in 98? I think it's in 88. An Oldsmobile was a moniker and a brand. I think it was its own thing, but it might have been part of General Motors. But the Oldsmobile used to be like a below a Cadillac but above a Buick, maybe. I'm not exactly sure, but there was Oldsmobile was kind of a vibe, and they had their sort of Fleetwood was an 88, and I think Public Enemy talks about an 88, and it's a big, beautiful boat of a car. It's a cruiser. It had leather seats, and there was one of these particular New Year's Eves when young adulthood has its pitfalls, pratfalls, and issues, but one of the great things is that if you're lucky enough to, when things start to present themselves like holidays and things, you start to want to be with your crew more than your family. And New Year's Eve has always sort of been reserved as a friends and family, like not a friend. You were finally off the hook for New Year's Eve. You know what I'm saying? You did Thanksgiving, you did Christmas, and New Year's Eve is kind of a party, and it's not doesn't necessarily have to revolve around the hearth of a family. So in the young early days, college years, those New Year's Eves were often spent in New York City because I had a friend in New York. I lived in New Jersey, and my other buddy lived in Philadelphia. And so we would often like just do these insane descend on the city and wind up where you wind up kind of nights. And on one of these New Year's Eves, famous New Year's Eve, my buddy from Philly came up and he borrowed his dad's car, which was an Oldsmobile 88, and it was a beauty. And we drove all over town in it, and it was a beautiful car. We were bumping music, had a great sound system, and I'm pretty sure he was. I would like to say he was a designated driver, but he was taking good care not to fuck this car up and all that stuff. And I think we were bumping the 88 song by Public Enemy, and we went and did our thing, and we were kind of rocked and kind of sloppy, and we were gonna crash at my buddy's parents' house and in Riverdale, and parked the car not too far from the apartment, and woke up in the morning and that fucker was gone. Poor friend of mine. And that hoping against hope walk down a street looking for you where you parked your car and knowing it's not there. And not only was it like there wasn't a space left, because parking in New York is so cutthroat, so stressful that even when they ganked a car, it wasn't like that space would have remained empty. It was probably a godsend to the lucky fucker who got the space after we got in, which was late. And little did that person know that it was a car theft that opened that space up. And so as we watched our friend walk down the street going, no, 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 and he just knew it, we all knew it. There are those moments. There's few in your life that are, where it's just like the jig is up, and you almost kind of surrender into it, They're not pleasant, and they're not there. For me, it feels like the elevator snaps off the cord, and just free falls. It's what it kind of feels like emotionally. And yet I had this horrible habit of avoiding the situation with laughter, meaning my friend and I could not contain ourselves, and it was at the expense of someone else's misery. So that was a low point all around. But when we returned to the house, my friend had to make the call to tell his dad his prize 88 was gone. And my buddy's father had to say, that's a tough break. He goes, actually this neighborhood is the number one auto theft neighborhood in the entire country, or at least in New York. And I was just shaking my head going, that is a terrible time for that anecdote. And maybe before you drove up, and maybe you could have commuted up instead of driving up. And, because I don't know if you know, in the 90s, there was that movie New Jersey Drive. And I think the shtick of that was that it was New Jersey Drive, meaning I think the crew in question, or the protagonists, were car thieves. And I think it was one of the rare inner city movies that featured Newark as the I never saw it. I'm talking about it with authority. But I think the whole point being that as long as you could make it over the GW Bridge, you were harder to apprehend with the stolen car. So this neighborhood was really like the GW Bridge, and boom, you're in New Jersey and you're down the turnpike, and that's why they call it New Jersey Drive. And that if you could get a car to Newark, and that was the pipeline that my buddy basically put out the raw meat for that crew. And so that's an 88 anecdote, and I'm trying to figure out, as this moves into 88, into closing in on a century mark, and what I've been trying to put out in the world in general, and in my life, career, you got to make these things a little more entertaining. And I think I've proven to myself that I can hold my own attention for an hour, direct to camera, no effects. And I don't know where I'm going to go, but I do think I might start to figure out a segment. And one of the segments is just like, if I come up with something during the week that dawns on me, kind of like it used to, a new bit for stand-up. I used to have 2 deadlines in my comedy career for new material. There was an open mic in Westwood at a Westwood Brew Company. It was kind of a how do I put it? It was known for a while as a kind of it spot for a certain alternative scene. I tended to be more mainstream, but somehow polighted my way, if that's a word, mannerly entered this sphere, and was embraced by the type of comic that may have rejected me on my presentation, let's say. Anyway, it became a fervent ground for me, and an appointment every Tuesday to keep. And it was new material. I think it was 5 minutes, which is not a lot, but it is when you're just trying out new stuff. And so it would be like you can't repeat at an open mic. It was my opinion. So I would use Tuesdays as a new material thing. And then as I got my own show, and that became Wednesday night, was another deadline. And it also depended. I started getting a little savvier about new material every week because of the audience coming back and back and back. You had to switch it up. And also, if somebody were coming on a showcase basis, or like the Chelsea Lately people scouted me there. And so I had to do my A set. And so that was, I had that latitude. But today, as far as that impulse to write things down or to type things into the phone, and I am ingesting a lot of film film dissection podcasts. I've kind of turned off the news, and so I have to, just for my own, music doesn't always keep your attention. So I like to have just jabbering in the background. It drives my girlfriend batty. She doesn't like the jabbering, but she does have news running a lot. But I like the jabbering. Like there's hard to find movies to put on in the background that are mostly talking, because the score can suck you in a weird way, or the action sequences and gunshot. There's very few. So a podcast is, what I'm starting to understand for me, and I think many people, obviously, it is that constant, no dead air. And I think that's what people are leaving out of why these podcasts are popular. The old radio standard of no dead air, meaning you can't even pause, right? So it's a constant stream, and it's a misnomer to call something streaming as a video, because that's a select and play and pause. But a true stream of consciousness is writing without pause. That's the morning pages, or any number of writing techniques. Is just there is, a podcast, within reason, has no dead air. And I think with the radio, it was because this is before pictures were an option. The radio, you had to paint the picture for the audience. The audience was wrapped in many cases, and so dead air would sound like somebody croaked. It would literally break the spell. And so podcasts have that. It's just usually one or two or three or four or five people talking constantly. And I think that drone, that no dead air, is also like no open thoughts, no woe is me, no trips down memory lane, no neurotic catastrophizing. So that I think in part is why these things are popular. And and I think for me, and I may be wrong, I could be wrong about all of it. For me, the more polished and segmented and locked in and produced a podcast, the less I enjoy it, because I guess I was raised with siblings, but not for many years I was alone. So I have the makeup of an only child, and I've always needed a constant companion. That's why I read incessantly. That's why I listened to music for many years. That's why TV became important. It was, you basically had to sort of entertain yourself. And obviously that wasn't ideal, and isn't ideal for the present generation. I did have the option of sports, and I did have the option of friend groups that became very important. But in those down times, that's the when you're still a kid, is because you can't spend inordinate amount of time with your friends, because you get called home, and so there's always go to bed, get ready for school, and then so it was always catch as catch can. And so there was always those sort of go back to your neutral corners, which was each person's individual house. So I had a lot of time to try to find a way to tame the beast of an active mind. And so, I've always been that person who's, needed that constant companion. And I think what happens is once that stuff got monetized, once it got, there got to be a way to manipulate the hearts and minds. That's where popular culture comes. And that's also where a lot of, why wouldn't you use it for propaganda purposes? I mean, think about Tokyo Rose, or, those radio DJs in those wars, like in Korea and in Vietnam, where they were, just brutalizing the psyches of the soldiers. And then yet, armed forces radio would play some hits, and that's where you get the Hendrix, and you get the Creedence Clearwater Revival being the soundtracks for those movies and for that era, and for how tapped in. And because there wasn't instant blogging, and there wasn't instant messaging, and there wasn't an interconnected internet, the distribution of those songs, those were as topical and as like up to date, but it would still, I don't know what the turner, from demo to radio to ears in Vietnam. I suppose a very fast turnaround would be a 3-month cycle. That was probably a prolific songwriter with a record deal and, being on the charts enough that they would get it on the radio and payola and all that stuff. But so even at its fastest, they notoriously famous turnaround, or the folklore of Neil Young writing Ohio, was hearing about Kent State. That's in 72, I want to say, 72 or 74. Kent State, where the National Guard fired on students, and 4 students were killed. A little known fact that Chrissy Hind was of the Pretenders. She was a student at the time at Kent State and was there that day. And I don't know if she appears in any of the footage or photographs, but she was there that day. And the sad thing about all of that is we know a bystander, and we don't know the victims because the bystander became famous. But I can only speak for me, right? I don't have the 4 souls committed to memory, but we know it's 4 because of a hook in a song. And famously, Neil Young heard that song, walked out into the woods some place in wherever, Laurel Canyon, wherever he might have been kicking it, and wrote the whole damn thing like it came out. And I don't know how soon after Ohio was on the charts, but it wasn't instant like it is today. And so while that is exciting that you have instant access, it also compels people to react. It compels people to be first. It compels people to talk shit when they haven't thought it out. And people like me, or people with a little more cautious mind, or who don't want to live in that sphere, don't engage. And, the sad thing about being isolationist when you're trying to mollify wounds, or the idea that you need, I joked many times with my girl that if I had a self-help book, it would be Nobody Cares, and so why should you? Because really nobody cares. You know what I mean? So, and except for the people who do, is probably what the other parenthetical statement should be. Because no one's missing my presence on the internet because I've chosen to have a wait and see approach. And this comes out every week, and now I'm posting 2 clips if I can find them. If I'm quippy enough to have 2 30-second bits that that fit in, I don't know. But this goes to say, and we're going back to needing the constant companionship and me wondering about how this is going to go. I'm actually just running a clock that I can keep an eye on, not because I want to either go long or short, but I'm starting to, and it may be right in front of the process, but like 3-act structure, right? So, and even comedy, like, my buddy was on a Comedy Central show, and what you find out is that there's acts. They call it Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, which is the stuff before the commercial breaks, and and they're broken up that way on a 30-minute show. And so you got to know, what do you got for the bumper up front? What do you got for Act 1? What do you got for Act 2? What do you got for Act 3? And this is not that structured, won't be that structured, but the rule of threes. And so until I really figure out what the hell I'm doing, and with the constant urging from my girlfriend to bring people on, I'm like, that's a long way away in my mind. But the rule of threes is the comedy rule, and the Holy Trinity, if you will. But the idea being a little intro, and then the segment about what was what kind of comes up, and then if there was something that I did prepare, even if it were just a tidbit, a voice memo, something I wrote in my Moleskine, a la having a deadline to say something I came up with. Essentially, this is a column. This would be the column part of a blog, or if you were a columnist, and who knew that would have been a dream job. But something happened this week, or recently. I've had to make a few decisions, and I have what they call I don't know what they call it, but I suffer from decision fatigue. I guess that we've heard that, that wall of the abundance in our culture, and yet the deprivation and the abundance in the same token, right? You go into a supermarket and there's more than 5 toilet paper brands, or 5, let's say. That's still too many. And then you've heard that it's been codified in social science or current event books about the paralysis of choice, right? Having too many choices freaks you the fuck out. That was always my issue with record stores, right? I mean, and that's why it became part of an OCD almost to become a fan of Bruce. Somebody who was prolific, and also it would be a must buy. I'm like that with certain authors. I know I can go through all of them because the quality, and that is a testament to how good they are. Even if matters of taste would have you disagree, the fact is, to be in the realm of any art where you are cranking out enough material that your fans can't wait for the next one, or that you have enough of a body of work for people to go through your whole catalog, that at minimum is a proof of their excellence. And then when it comes to in life, this is why I stick with the same things, the same brands, the same pencils, the same sodas, the same, everything the same, because I have issues with pulling the trigger on decisions. The pros and cons, I do that for a long time. I had a text I needed to send that could have started a chain of development that rather than sending it to get the outcome clarified, I belabored the text, when to send it. And I had basically a window where I knew the recipient would be available. And for 7 days, that window was, I was avoiding it. I was anticipating it, then avoiding it, and then finally relieved that I was at least going to kick it down the street one more day. And then it got to the point where the 7 days was even if you were simply following through and trying to, like, basically your ignoring it, or your apathy, or your failure to launch would help the outcome go a certain way, and it was sort of useless to even do it. I had to not let that neuroses, that vacillating, I had to, part of the fear I built up about pressing send was like, if I don't send, then I'm some kind of a jerk off, So I sent it, and things resolved to a point where I don't have to worry about that. But then there was another one, and I had to do some updating on my website, which is an out-of-date WordPress site. And I pay for the maintenance of it, but the template I picked is out of date and will not come back. And it got me, sort of, I've been catastrophizing along the lines of AI making all our lives useless, obsolete, and without merit or hope for a future, or my skills being, dominated or made obsolete by AI. And so you get somebody on the phone and you talk about, like, the way it's being sold, or the only way to fear it would be that it is so good that it can, it can shit out, literally, like it can shit out, point being, I'm muttering here, but if AI were so good, right, I would say to the guy, take my website with AI, and everybody's promising you new powered by AI, new tools. I want you to take my failing website, give me a new template, and I don't want to retype or send PDFs to it. I want you to take what's there, morph it, and then put it into a new AI generated one. And it can't because I have to send a compatible file for all the headshots that are on there. The media library that I thought like they won't even be able to modulize that and take it to the next thing. And so where's the AI going to help me get my new website out? It's still going to be, it's not a magician yet, right? And it's being sold as that. And rather than taking my job, or getting rid of actors, or getting rid of musicians, or getting rid of writers, find an AI that can make a website from a notion, from a prompt, fix my website, AI. And then the AI goes, whoa, I'd love to. And then they'd say, what's your web address? And you go, here's my web address. And then it would go, okay, well, I'll go take a look. And then they'll say, okay, I can do it. It'll be ready in a couple days. And, you don't have to do anything. If you want everything to stay the same, yeah, pretty much. Just I want it to not be frozen or I don't want blank screens on it because you don't support that template anymore. And so I think where people and myself, it's the wishes and the desires of people who want this shit that is the problem, not the thing itself, right? So, is it cool, right? Is it cool to have people not have to go into a coal mine? Yeah. Or is it cool to have a machine arm put a fucking car door on? Yeah. But what they're really after is what Andrew Carnegie was after, was productivity, and productivity over and pure profit. Right? And low overhead, right? And how do you get that? You eliminate workforces, and you sell shit that doesn't require even like a raw material, right? And now the raw material that goes into AI, which is probably a misnomer, and everybody thinks it's one thing, like it's a large language model, LLM, is that it? Is a fucking search engine where we have to make up terms for us to understand what the fuck it does. It's just better computing, correct? Right? And the incentives to eliminate things and to make, you still, it's just not helping me yet, I guess. And I am frustrated because I went to update a page on my now defunct website that I pay for, and screen went white. And that page, I was just trying to update one little feature like the resume, crashed the whole fucking thing because none of it is updatable anymore. And so if I want to go back into designing a website, AI is not going to help me. I'm going to still have to upload the bio, the headshots, the page links, all of that stuff that, makes that place, the old blog will be gone. I'd have to upload all the blogs and the photos that I accompanied with the blog, and is it worth it? Do people really need websites? It's just a ghost ship, and it's not interactive any longer. The Twitter feed is what the first bug was, that the Twitter feed, which I don't really use, was killing the website. So they disabled the kill. I just don't know what to disable to, and I guess it just won't be updatable, which is fine, but it's a bummer. And again, it's, and the guy explained it to me, well, it was the difference between a 16-bit and a 24-bit program. So you had to update at a certain point. And so what I'm saying about AI is that physics still kind of rules the, what is possible is still a nuts and bolts issue until what? Until I think physics is always going to, and I may be misusing what physics is, but, until we can bend space and bend time and walk through walls, the physical world will have its limitations. And so eventually your computer won't be able to keep up. And his better analogy is like we're at vinyl and we're at CDs now, and now we're at digital only. And so, but the point is AI isn't going to be able to read an old DVD. You still need the hardware. They're trying to get less hardware, and they're trying to make hardware less customizable, but that is a feature of their desire to sell more shit to you and to make you less able to be frugal, right? Because you don't have a choice. You either go off grid or you're on grid. You can't be kind of like in between, because I don't know how many eventually there'll be 0 new releases other than digital releases. So everybody's going to be listening to fucking Sugar Ray forever. You're never going to get a new music when you're in your cabin off the grid. You know what I mean? They're pulling out AM radio out of cars. So eventually all this stuff, and that's just the way obsolescence goes. But what I'm saying is AI it has to be converted from analog to digital, and that's really still all it is, and all digital is, as far as I understand it, because I did not major in this stuff, but digital is just gridding everything and making things digitized. And so you lose texture, and you lose malfunctionability, but there are malfunctions in the digital world also. And it's just frustrating, and I don't want to turn this into a fucking whine about my website, but because I'm still able to communicate, still able to use this vast wasteland and access the internet and all that stuff. So it's just a lot of work that you thought you already did, and that it could live, and they'll never sell you right? They'll never sell you how many goddamn cords, They're going to keep a lightning port for a while, and then they took away the earphone jack, and this stuff becomes unregulated, and then you're just paying out the ass for everything, right? And and then they figured somebody, and it's always some evil genius who figures out $12.99 a month is good. It's great, because then you don't have to spend for the that initial investment. You just keep paying $12.99 a month. And then they find out that they can't grow because they have all the subscribers they're going to have, and they keep they have cost increases when they have more subscribers, and then they have to raise the prices because the ad revenue is not built into the culture. It's just literally splitting at certain marks of the show. And so you pay to get rid of the ads, and it's all incentives to part people with money and to really not really solve any problem for, yourself. And it's just tough staying current. My mom's in her 90s. We got Mother's Day coming up, and can you imagine, the technology leap she's lived through? And I try to calm her down and explain to her, you don't have to show off how much you know to me, because I don't know all this stuff. And, it's frustrating for everyone except for, kids who are more adept at it, but also it's become ubiquitous. And when they hit whatever the next thing, I don't know when it plateaus, these updates that they don't help, you can't find the picture you just took. You go to you can't find it because it's all broken down into, selfies. Where the fuck is just my big bag of fucking pictures, right? I didn't ask you to move it, and part of being fluent with things is that things stay where they are, right? That's why you don't move shit in a blind person's house, because they know down to the centimeter how to avoid the corner. Don't move any furniture, and that's all these updates do, is they move the fucking furniture around. So you're banging into shit, or you can't find shit, and that's progress. And you're an old fuck if you if you can't find your fucking picture, and you do eventually, because I'm not intimidated by it, but it's an update sold as progress that is just somebody messing your fucking hair up. You know what I mean? Anyway, that's the rant about that. And I guess the thing I wrote about what I don't know why this came up, but I don't dig comic book movies, and they are maybe not even the future. They're the only hope for new releases, right? Is IP. I was blown away by Star Wars when I was a child, and I could give a shit ever since. And I know that sounds curmudgeonly, but like, I don't really think that, and I don't want to get into the debate about whether the storytelling is of any level. I'm certified snob. I pretend to even know Shakespeare enough to enjoy it, which I can't really cop to either, but I just don't get into it. But it's partly because I didn't read comic books. I had a less than 5 in my entire life. I know what they were. I knew that they are appealing to kids. It was the pictures. I liked all the ads. I even forced my mom to buy me a ventriloquist dummy, and it came like this, and it looked like looked like a newborn with a fucking string hanging out of its back, and you had to fill it with. It sucked. I thought it was gonna be like fucking the guy. Anybody else get that comic book fucking ventriloquist dummy? That fucking sucked. But so I know the culture to a degree of like the smell, the magazine, the I didn't get into the collectability of it, and I like superheroes to the degree that they ever got through, and the Hulk and shit like that. But the source material was never really. I didn't get into it, and so I was sitting around and I wrote the idea that like, the reason the fans of the superhero movies and the comic book movies, they get mad and they're like, they're enjoying it every installment because it's a manifestation of this thing that they are on the inside of. They know, similar to like what open source coding is, and similar to what with the problem with my website is that they're no longer, using that JavaScript or whatever the fuck it might be, and it's not portable to the next generation, right? And so seeing any of these things singularly on their own, I don't think they do a good job of bringing you into the loop. And then in and of themselves, seeing what the tech does to make the outfits come to life, which must be cool if you're into it, then it doesn't really blow me away. But the Springsteen movie, Half a Mile to Nowhere, what the fuck? I'm blanking on the fucking name of it. It's how much I the Springsteen biopic, I think they boofed it for a couple of reasons, but mostly out of the same reason that I think I can say it, just like someone who didn't enjoy Avengers. You hear comic book nerds in the forums getting mad at the casting, or mad at the direction the story went once they ran out of backstory, because they have a commitment to it. They feel vested in it, so they know they're allowed to say, this didn't work for me, right? I kind of feel that way with the Springsteen movie, because they picked the Nebraska album as this exemplar of his artistry, and I think they kind of missed the boat where maybe they should have started with Born in the USA, even though that's not my favorite album, or the story of you're gonna get dropped before Born to Run comes out, and instead they did this thing, and it was I enjoyed the movie because I was sitting there knowing every beat according to all the biographies I read. I knew where everything was going, and I was leaning into my buddy going, that's the Stone Pony, and oh, that's and knowing John Landau, and so I was like the comic book nerd because I have all the back issues of Bruce, and so even but my friend who was not avidly a Springsteen fan, he was like meh, and that's how I am with comic books. And so I think part of the good news, bad news scenario of the internet is the short form is almost pulling climactic scenes out of great films, and we all know it. And we get pleasure watching just the climactic scene, or a lot of Al Pacino and stuff. And we're at this point where not every story, but many stories have been told, and so all the blanks are filled in, and we can enjoy less of the long, drawn-out story because there's less surprise, and anything that really captures you these days has to really work a lot harder to be new and to be exciting and to not be from the collective conscious or the accumulated storytelling. And we need we all know the shorthands at this point. So there's not so much you can do to shock us. And everybody is derivative of another derivative, which would be like open source coding. And so when you start a bank heist movie, you know all the tropes, and tropes would be the remnants of the things left behind. Now tropes they can get politicized, or they can be, what's the big trope in a crime movie is one last job, and then I'm out. And for the first act, the dude is saying no, 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 and then finally goes okay. And but there's this joy in the fulfillment of knowing those plot points, those tropes, that are they going to get away? What are you going to do at the end to make it different? Will the good guy win or the bad guy win? And I think there's still some meat on that bone, but I think something's got to change, and I'm finding myself flummoxed for how to tell a story, because what happens is then it will just revert back to being pretty people saying pretty things, and because it'll be harder to interest people. And so I think technology's got something to do with it, but I also think not going back to the basics, the classics, boy meets girl. I remember getting into an argument. I loved Linklater's Boyhood, and the big gimmick was that they paused for the cause and they let people age, and they shot this movie over, I think it was 7 years. So you saw people age, and the boy went to a young man, right? And the actors aged along with them, and that was an impressive exercise. And my buddy was complaining I was like lame, and I said I thought it was brilliant because life is brilliant. We want to see that stuff, life itself. And I guess as we get away from that and we let the masters of the world, all they really want, think about it. Scott Galloway's talking about it. Like, AI does help them because it eliminates the need for us, for the very, very, very rich, but they, to enjoy a sunset on the Mediterranean is transcendent, I'm sure, and I'd like to do it, but, that's not for the working man. And it used to be that movies were the sort of fantasy fulfillment for the working class, and that the working class, you would find some exultant artists out of the working class. And then that was the aspiration of the artist class, was to, make it, if you take away that, and then, you tell somebody who lives in, inner city Cleveland that, boy, there's nothing like a Lake Como in the fall. It's like, yeah, well, and I don't mean that you need to make it make everybody, you're basically rubbing your people's noses in it, and then you're taking away the few oases of leisure. And the problem with this doom scrolling is it's your leisure time, but it's not a leisure activity in my estimation, depending on what is on your feed, right? I don't want to see a teacher getting a chair swung at him, or I don't want to see a teacher beating the shit out of a kid. Either way, why am I plugging that in when I used to be watching fucking, Beverly Hills 90210, worst thing that happened was, Dylan's hair was receding at supposedly 17, you know what I mean? So we have to think about that, or I have to think about that there's still beauty. And I guess I have to remember that, there are some about 40 to 50% abstaining from this. So this world is literally an opt-in world that if it's starting to have impacts, you can opt out. And I guess that would always be the thing to remember. And I think that'll sort of do what it's going to do. I don't know if I manage to have my segment, but I guess it's time to move into song territory. This week is a banger. Here we go with the banger. This week's a good one because it's not the first encounter with this band, but It is the second album, I think, or third. I'm glad this one made the list of the songs that earwormed their way into my all-time list, which is not based on criticism, rock criticism. It was just based on what I jammed to and where my heart took me. And it's the Brand New Heavies, who I wore out that first album. I wore it out. To me, it was the sum total of everything we kind of hope for in art and society. It was a multicultural band, a funky drummer, funky guitar player, funky lead singer, integrated, black and white, soul, jazz, hook, songwriting, just vibe. It just, if you were lucky enough to be in the 90s, in your 20s, in the 90s, and being in like places where that was the soundtrack, or it felt like, I don't know, there was a incredible feeling in New York of hopping in a cab, knowing where you're, not knowing what the night was going to lay out, but you had a couple stops and you could go between a dive bar and a very hip lounge, and you could meet a friend, and it was sexy, to be honest with you. It was sexy, and you would dress as well as the day you could, and you would kind of go out with a yard in your pocket, and you were going to spend it all. And this soundtrack, this song from the Brand New Heavies is Dream On Dreamer. And I forget now, as I thought why I loved this band, was the sound and the fact that people use their, like Tennessee by Arrested Development uses, I think, a beat sample off the Brand New Heavies, who might have been using samples themselves. They are the sort of really accessible acid jazz gateway drug, I would say. Jamiroquai came after that for me, but Brand New Heavies I was way into. What a dope name too, the Brand New Heavies. Just heavy, man, just dope. And there was just something so effortless about them. And their lead singer was Nadia Davenport, and I think she went solo, or she showed up on some of Guru's records and was ultimately replaced by Saida Garrett. And they always had a positive vibe. So Dream On Dreamer is Dream On Dreamer, life gets in your way, and, you know, and never stop, never give in. Like, all of this stuff was, I guess, the stuff I was clamoring for to motivate. Obviously, people, it's become de rigueur to have what do you call songs that on your playlist for working out. There's cardio stuff that's upbeat. There's heavy metal stuff for when you're doing leg day or bench press, or stuff to get fired up to. And then there's stuff to chill out, chill mix, all this stuff. We used to have to figure that out on our own, but when you hear this list as I lay it out week to week, I think it was someone who was trying to stay in the light. You know, I early in this development of this vlog pod, whatever this is, the death session, was a lot of me trying to figure out the title of my show. And I remember I was calling it We Carry the Light, and that was a very treacly, saccharine title. But, you know, I think that's the overarching theme of most of my work is I have to find, I got to hold on to hope. I have to find a silver lining. I have to believe there's a promised land. You know, it's what keeps me going. It's with very slim pickings and very slim rewards. I've kept going because somewhere along the line, I started gravitating to this music that had a message that was almost subliminal, because it just sounded like partying. It sounded like an aspirational, like, party in the sky that I wanted to get to, with hot women of all different colors and creeds, and friends of all different colors and creeds. This sort of 90s bar lounge culture where you were hip enough to be there, black or white, salt and pepper crowd. If you were hip enough to be there, then that was the sort of entry fee, And obviously you can't stay hip and all that stuff, and those are poses, etc. But listen to Dream On Dreamer by Brand New Heavies. You can't go wrong with, and most of the Brand New Heavies albums are press play as far as I'm concerned, because they are, the bag on them, I guess, would be that they're a little bit background music. You know, I don't know if they're players enough to stack up with serious jazz heads. I know the singer's dope and the songwriting's dope, and they're accessible jazz, acid jazz, hip hop jazz, whatever you want to call it. And I used to have a buddy who would like always ask me, because he was like at a record store, he'd call me like, what do I get? Because he had no clue, and he was like trying to like basically get jams, and that's why I had them, jams that, you know, you could put on for the ladies when they were over, that weren't you know, the stuff you would work out to. You want to set a mood, and nothing sets a mood like music. Nothing will trigger an emotion like music. Nothing underscores that's why the score, watch a movie without the score, you know, watch a video without the song. That's part of the collaboration, that it all kind of has to come together. And that's why some of the more superior actors come from the stage, because you have to do a lot of that without those prompts and without that music. But when you're in a rut and nothing can teleport you to a different time than music. And so Dream On Dreamer, it's pretty self-evident what that song's about. And it's from the album Brother Sister, and that's another good song on that album. I think it's their second or third. And like I said, you can't go wrong with anything from the Brand New Heavies. They could be in my top 5. They might be right after like Bruce, Prince, Brand New Heavies. Could be a top 5 for me. How much I love the Brand New Heavies and Jamiroquai, and more for how it really, like, it's like it was your outfit, it was your decor, it does it all. And so have a good time listening to that. I'll put last week's up. I'm blanking on what last week's up, but I'll put last week's song in the comments, and you'll get Dream On Dreamer in 2 weeks time. But you can always look it up yourself rather than have it here. But Dream On Dreamer, and maybe that's my outro going from now on. Peace.